My boss thought humiliating me in front of the whole office would scare everyone else into submission. He called me lazy and fired me during a Monday meeting like he was some kind of tech god. But I wasn't about to cry over spilled coffee. I had options, to be exact, and a plan to take apart everything he built piece by piece. By the end of it, he lost more than just me. My name's Liam, 35, and if you ask anyone from my last job, they'll probably still pretend I never existed. Which is hilarious, considering I built half the infrastructure their platform still runs on. I was the lead dev, not by title, of course, just by the amount of time I spent fixing everyone else's shit. Quiet, focused. Not the kind of guy who plays ping pong during stand-ups or kisses management's ass at happy hour. I like to build cool stuff and stay out of politics. That was my mistake, because in a startup run by narcissists, silence looks like defiance. And defiance? Well, that makes you a target. And when I got fired, I finally stopped staying silent. It happened during our usual Monday morning sync, the kind of meeting where half the team was still hungover from Sunday brunch and the other half just muted themselves and did actual work in another tab. The CEO, Steve, decided it was the perfect time to put on a little show. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there. His weird energy the week before, the way HR suddenly stopped replying to basic questions, the fact that our CTO hadn't joined a single planning call in 10 days. But I didn't expect what came next. Steve clicked off his screen share mid-sentence and said, "Actually, before we wrap this up, I need to address something." He leaned forward like he was about to tell a ghost story. "We've had an issue with productivity and accountability in the dev team," he continued. "And unfortunately, we have someone who's been coasting, refusing to follow direction, and generally being ungrateful for the opportunity this company provides." My Slack blew up. People knew where this was going. My name wasn't said yet, but I could feel the virtual heads turning. Steve smiled like he'd just landed a punch in a boxing match. "Liam, this is your last day. You're done here." He said it with so much fake sadness, like he was mourning my loss on behalf of the company while simultaneously throwing me under a bus with a press release in his back pocket. The man was a master of two things, deflection and manipulation. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even log off. I just sat there for another 10 seconds, while the Zoom silence stretched, like everyone was holding their breath. Then I said, "Cool," closed my laptop, and walked out of the office. That moment, me walking out while Steve smirked at his own reflection in the black screen, would end up haunting him more than any dramatic exit ever could. But at that moment, I felt like I just swallowed a bullet whole. See, it wasn't just about losing the job. It was the way he did it, publicly, strategically. He knew that making an example out of me would scare everyone else into submission. Cut down the tallest tree and the forest gets quiet. And for the first couple of days, the forest stayed silent. I didn't get sympathy texts, no surprise DMs. Everyone inside that building kept their heads down like nothing had happened. Because Steve ran his startup like a cult, with kombucha, equity promises, and the constant threat of exile. Still, I didn't go on a rant, didn't go to Glassdoor. I just went home and sat with it. I replayed that Zoom call 100 times in my head. And after the 100th time, I stopped being angry. I got motivated. By Wednesday, I was already planning. My resume was untouched. Instead, I made a spreadsheet. Names, companies, recruiters, friends, enemies, people who owed me, people who hated Steve more than I did. I didn't want just any job. I wanted a path that would let me tear down the bullshit startup culture Steve used to sell to investors like it was bottled genius. I wanted to hit where it hurt. So I reached out to Harper. She used to be in our marketing department before she left to become a recruiter for half the tech scene in the city. Harper was sharp, vicious in the best way, and had a memory like a steel trap. She remembered every jerk who ever took credit for her work, and Steve was at the top of that list. "About time," she said when I called. "You finally free?" "Fired, actually," I said. She laughed. "Same difference." By the next morning, she'd sent me 4 job offers. Not just interviews, offers. One was from a stealth mode startup I hadn't even heard of, backed by a VC firm that once tried to buy Steve's company. Another was from Steve's direct competitor. Guess which one I chose? But I didn't accept it right away, because this wasn't just about getting even. I wanted to do it right. If I was going to get revenge, it had to be surgical. That weekend, I dusted off an old codebase, one I'd built myself in between deadlines and burnouts. It was a project Steve had rejected months ago, called it bloated, unscalable, said it didn't align with the company vision. Translation: he didn't understand it and didn't want to look stupid trying to. Too bad for him. because that same code was about to become the center of something much bigger. Something that would change my life and destroy the illusion that Steve actually knew what the hell he was doing. I didn't quit quietly. I smiled and walked out, sure. But inside, I was already building something that would burn his fake empire to the ground. He fired me to make himself look strong. But all he did was set himself up for the biggest public humiliation of his career. By the time I finished my second overpriced latte that Thursday morning, Harper had already set the entire city on fire. She didn't waste time. She didn't even ask for my resume. Instead, she hit send on 4 emails, each with a contract attached. For real offers, not just promises of interviews or let's chat coffee invitations. These were please sign here and here and here job offers. And she made damn sure I noticed one of them came from Steve's biggest rival, ByteNest. Now, if you're not deep in the startup trenches, ByteNest might sound like another tech company trying to sell you subscription dog food or some app that reminds you to blink. But to Steve, ByteNest was his personal obsession. They were faster, louder, and infinitely better at pretending they weren't bleeding cash just to stay relevant. I opened the ByteNest offer, and I swear to you, I started laughing. It was double my old salary, plus equity, and a signing bonus that looked like someone fat-fingered a couple extra zeros. The cherry on top, a list of tech stacks that matched the very framework Steve had rejected when I first proposed it months ago. You remember that part, right? I had spent weeks perfecting a modular back-end solution, one that could scale without the Frankenstein mess our current system was built on. Steve shot it down in front of the dev team, said it was too clever by half, which is corporate speak for, I don't get it, so I'm gonna pretend it's bad. Anyway, I had saved that code, refined it, tweaked it like a lunatic in my off hours while the rest of the company was doing tequila shots at forced team-building nights. So yeah, when ByteNest said they were trying to overhaul their backend to be more efficient and modular, I didn't even need to pretend I had something ready. I did have something ready. I chose ByteNest, not just for the revenge, not just for the money, but because I wanted to prove once and for all that what I built actually mattered and that Steve's bullshit didn't. I signed the offer and sent it back. Then I called Ethan. Ethan was the only one left at Steve's company I trusted. Quiet, sharp, deeply allergic to office politics. We used to tag team projects and finish each other's pseudocode like an old married couple. When I got fired, he went radio silent, which I knew meant he was trying to lay low. So I texted him a simple message. Got an offer from ByteNest. I'm taking it. Need your brain. He called me in 5 minutes. Holy shit, he said. You're actually doing it? Already signed. I need someone I trust to look at the new system and help test it. He didn't even hesitate. Tell me where to meet. That Friday night, we met in the back of a co-working space that still smelled like new paint and broken dreams. I brought my laptop. Ethan brought takeout and a whiteboard. By Sunday, we had a skeleton of the new framework, running smoother than anything we ever touched back at Steve's place. I wasn't hiding this work, but I wasn't exactly shouting about it either. Until the stars started showing up on GitHub. I released a stripped-down open-source version of our tool under a fake name. No branding, no bragging. Just code that worked. Better than expected. People noticed. Devs started talking. ByteNest execs started foaming at the mouth. And Steve? He had no idea what was coming yet. But he would. Harper, being the savage she is, started circulating the news to a few friends in the industry. AKA the people who ran the newsletters, the blogs, the TikToks where engineers complain about being underpaid while casually running 6-figure side hustles. They latched onto the story fast. Some anonymous genius drops a revolutionary back-end framework online. ByteNest scoops him up. And Steve? He's still promising vaporware in investor meetings, hoping no one notices he's months behind and bleeding engineers left and right. Then came the fun part. Harper pinged me again. Just 3 words. Ellie reached out. Now, Ellie was the HR manager at Steve's company. But unlike the usual corporate robots who think spreadsheets are a personality, Ellie had always been cool, smart, observant, the kind of person who took notes in meetings she wasn't even invited to. And apparently she'd had enough. Her message was short, but potent. You're not the only one he tried to bury. She wasn't just offering sympathy. She was offering proof, documents, screenshots, internal strategy slides. An entire section of a deck Steve had apparently titled Dead Weight Removal Plan, with my name listed alongside other former employees he'd axed just to make the team look leaner before a funding round. It was all there, how he prepped for my firing down to the exact wording. He didn't stumble into that speech on Zoom. He rehearsed it, planned the timing, even included a slide titled positive morale boost via termination. I nearly threw my coffee across the room. I sent it all to Harper. Within hours, she had passed it on to some industry reporters she knew. They didn't run it as a story yet, but they did start asking questions. And that was enough to get whispers moving. Investors hate nothing more than bad optics, except maybe being lied to about product roadmaps. Steve had done both. And while he tried to do damage control with one awkward press release after another, I just kept building. ByteNest doubled down, hired Ethan, promoted me to lead the dev team on our new product. The same one Steve said was fluff. Funny how that works. But I wasn't finished yet, because Ellie, she had one more thing she wanted to share. Something that would turn this entire revenge plan from satisfying to legendary. She wrote, "You ready for a seat at the boardroom table?" The idea came to me at around 2 a.m. while staring at a bug report and half-eaten pad thai. I wasn't just going to release my code to ByteNest's dev team. That would be a win, sure, but not a public one. And public was the only way this would really hurt Steve. I was going to open source the whole damn thing. Everything he rejected, everything he mocked, everything he said was too academic or not agile enough. I was going to dump it on the internet and let the dev world chew it up like a free buffet in a room full of starving interns. So I cleaned up the architecture, made sure it was modular, clean, idiot-proof. I added inline comments, wrote out full documentation, even threw in some tutorials and example projects so people could start using it within minutes. I posted it under a pseudonym because I didn't need my name on it. I needed the idea to spread, not me. And once it was live, I sent the link to 3 people: Ethan, Harper, and Ellie. Ethan responded first. "Holy shit, man, you released it." Harper followed up with, "This is going to obliterate him." Ellie, she just replied with a single line, "Investors watch GitHub too." And boy, did they. Within days, developers were tweeting about it. Product managers were commenting on LinkedIn. The repo racked up stars like it was giving away free crypto. I started seeing posts like, "Why didn't someone build this earlier?" And "This framework is exactly what we needed. Clean, efficient, flexible." I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I just watched. And so did Steve. See, Steve's whole pitch to his board and investors for the next quarter was based on this upcoming breakthrough internal tool. Something that would change the way devs worked. Something proprietary, secret, better than the rest. Except now that exact thing or something even better was free, open, available to literally anyone. And people noticed. Startup gossip blogs started drawing the connection. They posted timelines, side-by-side comparisons, and began quietly asking, "Wait, didn't that guy they fired propose this 6 months ago?" The narrative was forming on its own. I didn't have to manipulate anything. Just let the facts speak for themselves. It wasn't just an ego hit. It was a credibility implosion. Suddenly, Steve was fielding uncomfortable questions from VCs and getting cold-shouldered at events. ByteNest's new CTO, my new boss, a fantastic guy named Raj who actually listens when people talk, told me that Steve had reached out to clarify misconceptions about the codebase. Raj didn't even reply. Meanwhile, I was watching ByteNest's Slack explode with devs who wanted to contribute, extend, and build on top of the project I had released. We spun up a whole initiative around it. A framework that could become the industry standard. My rejected baby, now everyone's favorite child. But this wasn't about code anymore. Not really, because Ellie had sent me something else. A recording. It was from a closed-door meeting. A call between Steve, 2 board members, and the CFO. The audio was a bit grainy, but the words came through loud and clear. Steve trying to explain why he fired me. Trying to pitch that it was a strategic morale shift, and that he wasn't contributing to our new agile direction. I don't think I've ever been so angry and so calm at the same time, because here he was, justifying gutting the team, slandering me as dead weight, all while stealing the bones of my idea for his own pitch deck. Ellie had risked everything sending that to me. I asked her why. She said, "Because he's been doing this for years, and no one's ever had the platform to fight back." Well, I had the platform now. Harper passed the audio to a few of her media friends. No big names, just the right people. The kinds of journalists who smelled blood in the water and already had a folder titled Shady Startup CEOs. They didn't release it immediately, but they let Steve know they had it. That was enough. I heard he had to cancel his next investor call. Something about restructuring priorities. I didn't care. I had work to do, because at this point, the code was flying. We had launched a closed beta with 2 enterprise clients. One of them was a former partner of Steve's company. The other, an investor who'd previously pulled out of Steve's last round. Poetic, right? Every time ByteNest landed a new deal, I imagined Steve staring at a dashboard and seeing the numbers shift against him. But the cherry on top was this. Ellie, the HR mole, had one final card to play. She called me, voice shaking with nerves and excitement. "I think you should come to the board meeting next Friday," she said. I blinked. "What? Why would I?" "Because they're voting," she said. "On removing him." Apparently, the investors weren't just annoyed anymore. They were pissed. The internal tool promise had been a lie. The roadmap was in flames. And now, there were whispers of mismanagement, retaliation, and possible legal exposure thanks to the documents Ellie and I had shared anonymously, of course. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't need to attend. Just knowing the vote was happening should have been enough. But then I remembered how Steve looked at me during that meeting. How he said, "You're done here," like it was a punchline and I was the joke. And I knew I had to be in that room. Not for vengeance. For closure. The boardroom was colder than I expected. Not physically. It was one of those sleek, overly modern conference spaces with climate control, polished wood, and chairs so expensive they probably had more ergonomic testing than the office's actual software. But emotionally, it was cold, tense, charged. I wasn't technically supposed to be there, but thanks to Ellie and a last-minute invite labeled guest expert under ByteNest's new partnership with one of Steve's investors, I was sitting quietly at the end of the table, laptop closed, just observing. Steve walked in late, of course. Same smug look, though it was definitely flimsier than before. A forced smile. A nervous twitch in his jaw I'd never seen before. He scanned the room, spotted me, and his mouth froze mid-greeting. I didn't even flinch. Just gave him a nod, calm as a monk. The meeting began with some generic updates. Sales metrics. Earn rate. Investor relations. You could tell Steve was trying to sound upbeat, trying to pretend like the last 3 weeks of PR disasters, leaked documents, and public humiliation hadn't rocked the foundation of everything he'd built. Then one of the board members, a guy named Vic with a voice like crushed gravel, cleared his throat and asked, "Can we talk about the open source tool?" Steve blinked. "What about it?" Vic held up a printed GitHub repo, my repo with annotations, highlights, and a sticky note that read, "Matches internal prototype. 90% overlap." Steve stammered. That's a coincidence." Another board member, a woman I hadn't met, cut in. "Coincidence doesn't usually come with inline documentation that matches your private Jira tickets." I wish I could describe Steve's face. That subtle moment where arrogance collapses under weight it didn't expect to carry. A flicker of panic. A flush of color. He looked around the room and realized, too late, that the tide wasn't just turning. It had already turned. Then Ellie stood up. She had been silent until now. Just another corporate face in a gray blazer sitting near the wall, typing notes. She stepped forward and placed a folder in the center of the table. "I believe the board should see these," she said. It was like dropping a lit match into a puddle of gasoline. Inside the folder were hard copies of the PDF she'd originally sent me, the deadweight removal doc. The one with my name highlighted. The one that laid out how Steve had planned my firing weeks ahead of time, like a reality TV elimination. Scripts. Justifications. Even timing suggestions. Vic read the first few pages, then looked up. "You really wrote this, Steve?" It was a draft. A thought exercise. We didn't even use a... "Cut the crap," said the woman board member. "Your own HR manager brought this to us. You executed a termination plan designed to humiliate an employee for optics. That's not leadership. That's theater." Steve turned to Ellie, eyes wide. You stabbed me in the back?" She didn't even blink. "You asked me to help fire a dozen people under false pretenses. I documented everything in case I ever needed to save my own ass. I didn't expect to use it, but here we are." And then, in what I can only describe as karmic poetry, Ethan walked in. He'd been working late at ByteNest the night before, but I told him about the vote. He entered with another board member, one of ByteNest's investors who also had money in Steve's company. They were partners now, technically competitors. But more importantly, Ethan had brought a letter of intent from one of our new clients, the one who had just backed out of a deal with Steve's company. The reason? Concerns over integrity and leadership transparency. That letter was the final blow. The board didn't even need to vote aloud. It was clear. Steve was done. He sat there, stunned, like a man trying to figure out how gravity suddenly stopped working. His hands shook slightly. He muttered something about betrayal, about loyalty, about how this is how you treat the guy who started this company. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. He stood up and stormed out, the door slamming behind him like a punctuation mark at the end of his career. After that, the room lightened. People leaned back, smiled, nodded at one another. The meeting turned to damage control, transition plans, and PR responses. They started talking about installing an interim CEO. One of them asked me, offhand, if I'd ever consider returning in a leadership role. I laughed, but politely. Appreciate it, but I've got something better now. Afterward, Ellie pulled me aside in the hallway. You good? She asked. I am now, I said. You. She smirked. Well, I might be unemployed tomorrow, but it'll be worth it. I promised her a drink on me. Maybe even a job. As we walked out of the building, me for the first time as a guest, not a ghost, I glanced back at the office I used to practically live in. It looked smaller. Funny how that works. The news hit like a bomb, but in the best way possible. By the time Steve was officially out, I was already halfway through a cold brew and the quietest grin I'd ever worn in public. ByteNest was buzzing, not just in our Slack channels, but in real life. Clients were reaching out faster than we could reply. A few even admitted they dropped Steve's company just to work with the guy who built the tool before they could. I didn't correct them. Let people believe what they want. The truth was better. I built it after they fired me. Out of spite. And it worked better than anything Steve's team ever shipped. The day of the board meeting, I showed up early. Not because I had to, no one told me to dress up or even attend, but because I wanted to see it. I wanted to be in the room where it happened. The air smelled like expensive espresso and weak deodorant. A tech boardroom classic. Everyone filed in slowly. People shook hands. Small talk. Nervous laughs. Steve came in last, looking like he had swallowed a cactus. His usual energy was gone. No jokes. No fake charisma. Just a hollowed-out version of the guy who once held all the power. He didn't even look at me. Smart move. The chairperson opened with a bland statement about changes in leadership and realignment of strategic direction. Translation, this is going to get bloody. Then came the vote. It wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was almost surgical. The board moved to terminate Steve's role, effective immediately. One member abstained. The rest? Unanimous. Even the guy Steve used to play golf with. Brutal. Steve didn't say anything. He just sat there, blinking like he was still buffering. It's one thing to lose your job. It's another to lose your company while the guy you humiliated watches you implode in a room full of people who don't even flinch. I should have felt bad. I really should have. But all I felt was this calm, slow satisfaction crawling up my spine. Like karma finally paid off with interest. After the meeting ended, the new interim CEO, some smooth guy from finance, pulled me aside and thanked me for my honest feedback and open-source contribution. Apparently, my code had saved them from promising investors a product they couldn't build themselves. So in a weird, poetic twist, they kind of owed me. He offered a role. Something advisory. Flexible hours. Big pay. I turned it down. It wasn't about burning bridges. It was about proving I didn't need the bridge at all. I had already crossed the river and built my own dam tower on the other side. Back at ByteNest, Ethan popped a bottle of cheap champagne. We sat around a folding table that doubled as a desk and ate pizza off napkins. It was perfect. Messy, loud, fun. Not the polished, sterile garbage Steve used to peddle as culture. Ellie came by that weekend. I didn't know what to expect. She'd technically quit after nuking Steve's career, but she walked in with a resume and a confident smile. Looking for someone who knows where the skeletons are buried? We hired her on the spot. Harper, meanwhile, had already turned our little revenge tour into a recruiter's dream. She funneled top-tier developers our way like a magician pulling rabbits out of hats. She didn't even take a cut. Said it was too fun to charge. I started getting calls from podcasts, tech blogs. Hell, one VC tried to offer us seed money just to hear the backstory in full detail. We didn't take the money. We didn't need it, because something incredible happened in the weeks that followed. That little framework Steve rejected, the one he mocked me for pitching, became an industry standard. Contributors piled in. Forks popped up. People were writing plugins, integrating it into their platforms, building on top of the thing that got me fired. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was legacy. And Steve? Well, last I heard, he was consulting for some startup that hadn't read the gossip blogs. His LinkedIn update was painfully vague. Exploring new opportunities. Passionate about leadership. Yeah, okay, buddy. I won't lie, I screenshotted it. Saved it. Laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my keyboard. Sometimes I wonder if he knows it was me. If he figured out the pseudonym I used to publish the framework. If he pieced together the chain reaction I set off the moment I walked out of that room with his voice still echoing, lazy and ungrateful. But whether he knows or not doesn't matter. Because I'm still here, still building, still winning. And him? He's just another asshole who underestimated the quiet guy in the hoodie.